task that you take on, if you do the very best job you can do, it will make you feel great, and I think it will make people understand that you are serious about what you're doing. And one of my mentors in life was Mitt Romney. Mitt was my very first boss at Bain & Company in the Menlo Park, Sand Hill Road office for many years. And Mitt, to the young consultants at Bain, he was a partner actually when I started, but he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, "Meg, if you are constantly in the neighborhood of good things happening and you deliver the results and you don't care who gets the credit, I promise you, you will get the credit." And to a new MBA, that was a little counterintuitive, but I have to say, that notion of being in the neighborhood of good things happening and delivering the results and ultimately you will get the credit has stood me in really good stead. But you have to be accountable. I think the next thing, the value that I'll talk about is relationships really matter. Along the way, those relationships, your college roommates, your high school friends, your business associates, they have been really important to me. And it is, of course, your family is incredibly important. And I'll come on to this later as I talk a little bit about work-life balance. But my husband is a saint. And Griff's here in the front row. And you have to invest in those relationships. And he has been a marvelous husband, a marvelous father. And so I was just talking to someone today, and they said, "Gosh, he must be incredible to let you run for governor." I said, "Well, yeah, we'll get onto that again." But I'll tell you a story. You might recall eBay was hard down for 22 hours on June 10th, 1999. And this was the height of the dot-com bubble. CNN was parked outside eBay headquarters wanting an hourly update on when the site was going to come back up. In any case, I really moved into eBay for a couple of weeks. We ordered cots and sleeping bags and toothbrushes because I knew I was going to need to be there. I didn't know a lot about technology at the time, so I knew I was going to have to lead by being there. And it was very interesting. I called all of the eBay's big vendors, and I said, "You know what? We really, really need your help." And so we had Scott McNeely from Sun Microsystems, Larry Ellison from Oracle, and Ray Lane from Oracle, Mark Leslie from VeriSign and from Veritas. And because I figured if I was there, I could get the very best people to help us out of this jam. And it was very interesting. I've known Scott McNeely for 30 years. He was in college, actually, with my husband. And I think he thought that when I called him, I was going to yell at him and say, "This is your fault. It is the back end, Sun E10Ks, the Sun Starfires that have, collapsed." And instead, what I said to him was, "Scott, I really need your help." And it is because I had invested in that relationship with Scott over the years that I could ask him for help. And he tells this story widely. He said, "If she'd yelled at me, I wouldn't have helped. But because she asked me for my help, we did everything we could to help eBay out of this bind." And I will tell you, Sun Microsystems did everything possible. He turned himself and his company into a pretzel to help get eBay out of this. I think the last one I'll talk about is, and then we'll turn to questions, is I have a bias for action. I believe that the price of inaction is far greater than the cost of making a mistake. That you have to take risks in life. You have to do things that you never dreamed you should do or could do. And I can trace this very clearly to my mother. And one of the bittersweet things about this book is my mother passed away on January 18th. And so much of my life was inspired by my mom. And the good news is, right before she died, my brother and my sister and I got to read her most of this book. She was too sick to read it herself, but we got a chance to read lots of it to her. But anyway, my mother taught me a bias for action, and I'll tell you a little story that was very formative in my early years. During World War II, my mother, like so many of her generation, wanted to help out with the war effort. And so she did what seemed to her the obvious thing to do. She joined the Red Cross. And she lived in Boston at the time, and I think she thought she'd stay in Boston and it would be quite safe and manageable. But when she showed up for her first day at the Red Cross, they said, "Actually, we need this group of women to go to New Guinea in the South Pacific." So my mother went, "All right, let's go." She flew from Boston to San Francisco and then took a troop ship for 30 days to New Guinea. And she said the very best thing about the troop ship was that she got seasick and lost 30 pounds. But she gets to New Guinea, and the base commander greets the troop ship of women and says, "We have a shortage of airplane mechanics and a shortage of truck mechanics. Which of you women would like to volunteer?" Trust me, my mother had never looked under the hood of anything. But she volunteered because she knew that was where the need was greatest. And she wasn't scared. She said the challenge fueled her. And 4 years later, after being in New Guinea for 4 years, she was a fully certified airplane mechanic and a fully certified truck mechanic. And she used to tell my brother and sister and me growing up, she'd say, you can do anything you want because I can overhaul a Jeep engine faster than the men. My mother did some other pretty adventurous things. She and her very best friend and 8 children, there were 3 Whitmans and 5 Gardner children. She and her very best friend loaded 8 children into 2 Ford Econoline vans and made 2 cross-country camping trips 2 successive summers. The first summer, we left on June 1st and came back on August 28th and traveled all through the United States, traveling to different campgrounds and national parks. Remember, this was before GPS, this was before movies in the back of the SUVs, and we didn't stay in a motel or hotel for 3 straight months. Imagine that, 2 women, 8 children, I was 6 years old, and we had a ball. We saw the most incredible sights, we read, and we were taught to be flexible. And, you know, don't tell my mother that she couldn't do it again, because the next summer we took off to Alaska. We drove 3,000 miles along the Alcan Highway, most of which was unpaved. And we really had a remarkable time. But you can imagine that 3 Whitman children in the back of the Ford Econoline van would actually fight from time to time. I know that's hard to imagine. But when we would get into a fight, my mother would say to the 3 of us, stop fighting, get out, and I'm going to pull over to the side of the road and you're going to run in front of the van until you get tired. And sure enough, you would think we would learn. But I'm going to tell you that summer we probably ran 30 times in front of the van. I would be the first to be back in because I was the youngest, and my poor 14-year-old brother would have to run like 3 miles before he would be allowed back into the van. But I think if I hadn't absorbed that bias for action, I would not have come to eBay. This was not obvious. It was a tiny little company. The internet was just at the beginning of its remarkable revolution of everything we do. My husband was at the Mass General Hospital in charge of the brain tumor program, and we were loving being in Boston, where we'd been back for just a few years. But I have to say, when I met Pierre Omidyar, who is a remarkable young man, by the way. Now, well, he was 29, he's now 40 or 41. A remarkable individual. And what I saw there was he had created a way to do business that no one had ever seen before, and people had an emotional connection to eBay. He told me people had met their best friends on eBay. It was early days of collectibles, where people had connected over a shared area of interest. And I said to my husband, "Hun, I think we should move back to California." And to Griff's credit, he said, "Let's go. What is the worst thing that can happen? Let's have a bias for action." And of course, it was one of those remarkable experiences. And I will tell you, if I didn't have a bias for action, I really wouldn't be running for governor of California. And I'll tell you a little bit about that, and then we'll go to question and answer. So I've been a candidate now for a year, and it is a huge undertaking, but it has been great fun. And I am a big believer in focus. It's one of the values that you'll read about in the book. And I want to focus on 3 things for California. Far better to do 3 things at 100% than 20 things at 10%. And if I can accomplish just 3 things, it will be first, creating and keeping jobs in California. With a 12.5% unemployment rate, if we don't put people back to work, I can tell you there is no way out of this mess. Number 2, we've got to make government more efficient and effective. And I know every politician says that. Trust me, I have been all over the financials of the state, and we can spend our taxpayer money so much more efficiently. We've been told by the press, you either raise taxes or cut services. It's not true. There is a third way here. And then last but not least, my personal passion is we once and for all have to completely fix our kindergarten through 12th grade education system. We should not be proud of this. In the 50s, we had the #1 public school system in the country. People moved to California to put their children in our schools. Today, we're probably rated about 48th out of 50 states. And it's not okay to deny the vast majority of California kids a chance at the California dream. So, lots to do. I think we can make a huge difference here, but it's all about focus and it's all about leadership. So with that, why don't we go to questions? And I think you have a roving mic, and we'll just answer questions until Kepler tells me that we have to stop. So thank you for coming tonight. you.